We exist, and many wonder why. Answers have been offered to us from those who came before, and many have accepted these answers out of loyalty. But the truth is, we should build an understanding of reality using all available evidence. Separating our loyalties from our search for objective truth is a beginning. Studying math, science, history, biology, physics, etc. is our lifelong process, subject to the practical constraints of our lives. Faith comes only after evidence has been absorbed. All evidence has been absorbed, provided we have an ongoing mechanism to adjust as we become aware of new evidence. There is nothing we observe in reality inconsistent with the existence of an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God, so long as these axioms are adjusted to create coherence. God does not know the future, not entirely anyway. And after we die, if we are judged, it is based upon what we know, not upon what God knows. All ethics are situational, but the acceptance of the existence of God is the same as accepting some amount of free will and the difference between good and bad, although it is often hard to discern between those two in particular cases. The evidence shows that the Earth came into existence about 9 billion years after the Big Bang. Evidence from math and logic suggests that God didn't know we were going to exist, but now that we do, God has decided to let our emergent universe to continue. Here we are, wondering just as much as God is, what's going to happen to us, wondering what we might do next. So I guess I want to talk about the wedding at Cana in the Bible. It's in the Gospel of John. Just Google wedding of Cana if you want to read the story. I know many churches throughout the world will be reading about the wedding of Cana this coming Sunday. This Sunday is going to be January 20th, January 19th, the day before the inauguration of Trump, something like that. The wedding at Cana tells the story of Jesus. Before his ministry began, he is at a wedding, and his mother talks to a waiter at the wedding, and they're like, "We're out of wine," and his mother leads Jesus to perform a miracle where he converts water into wine, and the wine that is made is so good that it elicits this statement that, most people put the good wine out first at a wedding and then the bad wine later, because when everyone's drunk, nobody already cares about the bad wine or something like that. What should we think about the wedding of Cana? Well, in the first place, it obviously didn't happen because we know about chemistry. The laws of chemistry, the laws of physics have never been violated in this world. How do I know that? I don't. I hold it as an axiom because nothing in my life has ever suggested otherwise. And whenever I hear about stories of miracles or something, there's always alternative explanations. And then there are contradictory miracles. Like this miracle implies this truth, but that miracle that happened over there implies a different truth, from a different religion or whatever. And so which one, if miracles happen in this religion, that must be the true religion. But then miracles happen in that religion, and so that one must be the true religion. So maybe the miracles never happened in the first place. That's what I hold. I don't think they ever occurred. I don't think that that means we should dismiss the story. The wedding of Cana I haven't looked at the internet about it, or have no particular interest, but it's probably inspired so many beautiful paintings and poetry and stories. And I can think of, there's a song where you turn water into wine, and it's a foundational story that helps us to create poetry and art. Sure. What else does it tell us? We know that the book was written probably about 60 years after Jesus actually lived, in a language different than he spoke. So the idea that this wedding ever actually happened is minimal. But I love the idea the Messiah, like the greatest human being that ever lived, and I don't think Messiahs have ever happened or will ever happen. I mean, in the sense that if somebody comes and rescues you, you're drowning in a pool or something, and somebody swims into the pool and pulls you out, then I guess that person's the Messiah to you, right? But to the extent, within, that defies the ordinary explanation of a Messiah. Messiahs don't exist. They never have, and they never will. There's never been a prophet. There never has, never will. That doesn't mean that somebody can't clearly look at what's happening to people around and saying, if you continue to do this, this is going to be the outcome. Well, that often somebody can make that logical realization and try to tell people, don't do this because your alcoholism is going to lead to something really awful, or these small white lies that you're telling your husband or your wife is going to lead to these terrible outcomes, in time. That's not really the act of prophecy, is it? It depends on, who you ask, I guess. I love the idea, though, that the most perfect guy that ever lived, the most perfect human being ever lived, Jesus, that he would have attended a wedding and would have made it better for everyone. You know what I'm saying? I mean, in a way, that's a real takeaway. And then, the fact that he, seemed to be reluctantly obedient to his mom. It's kind of weird, being reluctantly obedient to his mom. It's like, how many people have spent a lot of time trying to parse the words? Why did he respond to Mary like that? And I think it's a dead end to go down that logic. It's just, it's not worth it. And that's one of my number one key takeaways here from the miracles of the Bible, the miracle here at the wedding at Cana, is that, what was that it's not true. But it doesn't mean that we should hate on it. It doesn't mean that you can't still believe in Jesus. It's just so long as you understand how to believe in him correctly. You don't... your loyalty can be so strong to this idea that I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus, and there have been people that have been known to torture you to death for saying otherwise. Throughout history, that there's some loyalty to Jesus for you. So, the idea of being loyal to a system is not what truth is, and that's the number one thing that I'm interested in trying to find. So, should you read the Bible? Absolutely. Should you believe in Jesus? Sure. I mean, not everyone does in a way. Even you can't help but to believe in Jesus. His name is everywhere. The Muslims hold him up with high honoration, even though they don't believe he was, actually resurrected. I don't believe he was actually resurrected. I don't think any of the miracles of the Quran or the Bible are true. Moses never parted the Red Sea. The law given to Moses on Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments, they're not from God. They're a human being looking at the world carefully and coming to the realization, if we just followed these rules, everyone's lives would be an awful lot better. So the rules got announced, and and then wherever those rules didn't really work properly in given situations, then there were alterations or justifications made for that, and so that the rule was still true, and always going to be able to do that. A classic example for me would be "Thou shalt not steal." Yeah, you really shouldn't steal. Could you imagine, like stealing a coworker's wallet or something? It's like that would be like the most outrageously awful thing you could ever do. You should go to jail. It's ridiculous. Thou shalt not steal. Of course you shouldn't steal. But does "Thou shalt not steal" extend to when the rich people own everything and you own nothing? Or, something like that, and the Robin Hood situations. So "Thou shalt not steal" has a contours to it that ultimately make it not really necessarily true. And so that's one of the arguments. I believe strongly in situational ethics. All ethics in the end are actually situational. You should follow good moral rules unless you have really good reasons to not follow those moral rules. And what moral rules should we follow is you have to fully understand what human beings are. We evolved out of an evolutionary process, 300,000 years at least for Homo sapiens. We know this because we dig down and we found bones and we piece together with scientific evidence these truths. These things weren't known to people, 2,000 some years ago. The author of the Wedding of Cana didn't know the rules of chemistry at all. Probably. Was that guy even trying? Probably a guy, right? I think his name was John the Elder. He was a disciple of this is what scholarship, I think, says. He was a disciple of the original apostle, St. John, who died, tradition has it, on an island, in a prison island, Patmos or something like that. Well, not particularly relevant information in some ways. What was he trying to do by writing this story? Well, obviously, is it bad to write fiction? No. People read fiction all the time. Fiction's interesting to read. It tells good stories, So why did he tell this story? Because he wanted to draw your attention to a person that, people later on look back and they were like, that guy was a really good guy, what the hell? And so draw your attention to him for purposes of inspiring people to greater truths, but also probably to fight back against the Roman Empire. And I've talked about this long, and I'll bring this up again later, but, when you don't have the military power to cast off an oppressor, you try to fight the oppression in some other way. And using religious ideas to fight your oppressor, pretty smart. I definitely good idea. And that's probably, what was happening, with a large part of the New Testament. The Romans were so powerful you couldn't fight them. When the New Testament really starts to take off after you see the complete debacle of trying to fight the Roman Empire, in 70 AD when all of Jerusalem was destroyed and the Masada would eventually happen. And so if you can't beat an oppressive army with military action, then you fight them anyway, but you just find other ways to fight them. And that right there is the number one evidence that I have for why none of the miracles of the New Testament are true. They were put in the book to draw your attention to it so that you would pay attention to it and read about this story. And hopefully you'd be smart enough to logically figure out what the story is really trying to tell you. And it's about a young man who took full responsibility for who and what he was, which is, probably the king of his people, or certainly a leader amongst his people, probably in the line of King David, whatever. And, and he's looking at the Roman authority, the Roman powers that control a city they have no business being a part of. Jerusalem belongs to me. I'm the king. I'm Jesus, right? I'm the descendant of King David, and this is my city. But there's Pilate, very much in charge. Totally sucks. Wish he wasn't. And, eventually he runs afoul of the guy and gets executed. And he could have tried to lead an armed rebellion. He might have been successful for a while, lead an armed rebellion. And, 10, 15 years later, Rome finally chases you down and kills all of you, and so, which is essentially what happened in 70 AD, 30 years, 40 years after. So you can see why people, knowing what he was trying to say, we don't want to fight these guys. Everyone's like, you should fight these guys, or thinking that way. He was a coward or something. He does what happens. He dies on the cross. 30, 40 years later, the people who were listening to him at the time start to wise up. Hey, man, he was right all along. We never should have fought these guys because they're too powerful. And then they hold him up as, someone to consider as an, they hold him up as someone that we should venerate, and he gives the title Son of God. And the next thing you know, it creates a set of axioms, that whoever's last, least, and weakest shall be the most important person, which is the exact opposite of the philosophy of Rome. So they create a set of philosophies that are the exact opposite of the philosophies of Rome as a way of chipping away at Rome. And the story goes on, who really knows what destroyed the Roman Empire, but they would eventually embrace a religion that was created to destroy their culture. It's like, that's a much finer way to think about this than to actually read the book read the wedding at Cana story and think that Jesus really was among us and he really did turn water into wine in complete violation of the laws of chemistry. No. that didn't happen. It never has. None of the miracles in the Bible are true. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be loyal to Christianity. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't be loyal to our local parishes and stuff. What we need are genuine teachers within, I'm Catholic, so I'm thinking about the Catholic Church. But I mean any of the churches. What we need are leaders within those churches who can speak just like I'm speaking. And that's what we need. And so there's so much more to say, but I'm going to try to keep on going. I'll see you next week. I'll try to talk about the next reading that's going to be in the Bible and focus on other things. I guess I could keep going and talk about some other stuff. I don't know. Trump's about to become president. The wildfires in California. I don't really want to talk about any of that stuff, to be honest, but it is what it is. It just, we'll see. We have to obviously be in a reactionary mode if things start to go in a really bad way. I mean, the whole deportation thing just got me really disappointed in our country. We shouldn't be talking about deporting. We should be talking about bringing people out of the shadows and trying to find some way to create liberty and freedom for all human beings in the entire world. More on those ideas later. Love y'all. Peace.